Welcome to Ladies of Another View. Ladies of Another View. What I was trying to say is Trent Lewis is here sometimes, and he says Ladies of Another View and a dude. We have a dude today, but first of all, we have Lori and Carmen, and then Gene Graner of Heartland Invest. And we're so excited that he's here because he's going to kind of break down what's going on with the trade going on, the markets over in Russia.
What it's doing to the markets and expectations you as a consumer and thoughts that you may have and want answered. So.
Amen. So why don't we just get started? You know, we farm and ranch. You came off a ranch farm. Tell us what's going on with the trade, with the grains. What can we expect over here?
Well, first off, grain prices had been in an uptrend since last fall. We had short crops, as you know, up here in the northern plains, Canada, North Dakota, Minnesota. The wheat crop was pretty much an absolute failure, and that started the grain price movement to the upside. There was failures that was developing in South America. We had seen soybeans and corn production starting to fall off in December, January, and February of this year. That was causing an elevation in prices. And then, of course, as in ecclesiastics, there are wars and there are rumors of wars, and we kicked into that and have since elevated the price of grain because Ukraine is the breadbasket of Europe. And this wheat chart that we have showing here, I kind of brought this with, just wanted to show you how you can see last year, you can see on the far left side of the chart, that's last April, and you can see how prices, and this is based off of May Chicago wheat, started elevating. And you have your peaks and valleys and pullbacks, but as you can see, as we move more towards the right of the chart, January and February, prices had leveled off at about $8, $8.50, and there's a little blue arrow to the right. That little blue arrow pointing up right before the explosion is the day that Ukraine was invaded by Russia. And the price of wheat subsequently up until today has jumped some 20%. $2 a bushel from the $8 bushel, and we now have wheat. Kansas City wheat's at $10 a bushel, Minneapolis wheat back over $10, and it's probably creating a lot of concern for consumers. What is happening here with food prices going vertical, and rightfully so, prices have elevated because Ukraine, they're the breadbasket of Europe, so to speak. Ukraine is an amazing black soil area. It's as beautiful as Iowa. If they could ever farm Ukraine like we farm Iowa, they could bury us, but they don't have the banking system like we do. They don't have the infrastructure to move grain like we do. One of my employees was born in Ukraine and immigrated here, and he's always going back over. In 2012 through 2018, he's made almost an annual trip over there, and he laughs how what we call a highway, not even a state highway, just a simple highway going down the road with potholes would be considered an interstate in Ukraine. So we take transportation so for granted here, and large grain trucks have difficulty moving because a lot of the roads aren't paved. And so these semis that you see hauling grain is not prevalent over in Ukraine. It's more like twin axle trucks, so they can push themselves along in the mud, so to speak. So grain prices have elevated as of late. And that is because with the war that has taken place, it shut down all possibility of grains leaving Ukraine. Now we'll pull up another chart I brought with. It's the ports of Ukraine and where the importance is. Now when you look at this, Ukraine, as you pull your eye off the map, there's 4 yellow diamonds. Those are the large exporting grain ports out of Ukraine. There's Odessa, Mykolaiv. 90% of all the grains roll out of those ports. To the right of that chart, you're going to see the red diamonds, and that's where 90% of all the Russian grain shipments come out of. Now, grain could ship from Russia right now, but they've been knocked out of the transactional banking system. We'll talk about that in a second. But as far as Ukraine is concerned, the ports now, the Ukrainian military have put mines into the waters to keep the Russian Navy from being able to come aground with larger amounts of troops. So if and when this Ukraine-Russian hostilities ends, as of today, we're now seeing infrastructure damage. And this infrastructure damage makes it difficult because railroads are getting bombed now. So how do you get the grain down to those ports on southern Ukraine? You can see that water system that kind of comes down Ukraine, the middle of Ukraine, runs to the right and then back left. It's kind of like their version of the Mississippi, but there's not much freight traffic taking place either. But once the hostilities stop, there's going to be an assessment period. And then until that can happen, who actually owns the grain? Is Ukraine farmers the owners of the grain, or is Russia going to be controlling it, or whoever's doing it? Right now, the SWIFT banking system has locked the Russians out of transactional business. Now, there's a fine line to that. First off, SWIFT is an acronym for the Society of Worldwide Interaction Financial Transactions. It's an old archaic system designed 1973 before fax systems were considered leading edge technology. And so it can be circumvented, as the head of JP Morgan just said yesterday, Jamie Dimon. He said it can be gone around. I mean, you can literally send an email from one bank to another bank to wire transaction money for the purchase of this grain. You just have to believe it is a real email, that it's secured. Through the SWIFT, it is secured and can be done that way. Now, China, which is always a couple steps ahead of everybody, they developed their own. It's called ICPS. Don't ask me what the acronym meant, but you can Google it up. It does the same thing. It's a guarantee of transaction, because China, second largest economy in the world, they've learned to offload themselves off into a different platform. In case of why? Well, maybe in case they like what Russia's doing with Ukraine, if they see success in Ukraine from Russia, then they're going after Taiwan, because as we know, they want Taiwan. The question is, how would it stand in the world scene? And so with that, Russia is kind of offline for a while and won't be able to export grain, and neither can Ukraine. 30% of all the wheat in the world, 20% of all the corn in the world comes out of this Black Sea region that we call Ukraine and Russia. So it's creating this sense of concern that people may starve. Oh my God, where is it going to go to? Well, wheat has been higher than it is currently. We've seen wheat go to $20 a bushel. We've seen $14 wheat just as late as 2008. And nobody died and starved to death. And I just need to remind the consumers that even though Ukraine is offline from now, that wheat is not vaporized. No nuclear bombs have been detonated. The wheat is still sitting there in grain bins. And these grain bins are not sitting near military installations getting bombed. They're not sitting near cities potentially getting bombed. They're literally out in the countryside where nobody cares. And so it's just a matter of eventually this grain will come to town. It's just a matter of later rather than sooner. So in the near term, we have to get by. So we're seeing a lot of foreign buyers, we call non-traditional customers, are coming to the U.S. to buy. They're buying wheat, they're buying corn, they're buying soybeans, they're running our prices up. So you might think, oh my goodness, I need to run out there and buy all the flour and sugar I can get my hands on. And I'm going to say it's not necessary. Yes, prices are going up, but we're not going to run out of anything anytime soon. Just for example, there's probably 100 million bushels of wheat left to be sold of old crop Ukrainian supplies that could have went out to the world until the new crop supplies come out this fall. The U.S., after we figure it's called a carryout, what we use for planting crops, feeding, all needs exports, we call what's left over as carryouts. Our carryout in the U.S. is around 680 million bushels. So even if all the Ukrainian wheat that is going to be missed out on being sold, about 100 million bushels, comes to the U.S., yes, it will elevate our prices, but nobody's going to go hungry. We're not going to run out. Your price of bread really shouldn't go up much, but I won't say it won't, because in a loaf of bread, when wheat was about $4 a bushel, there's about 4 cents worth of wheat in that loaf of bread. So when wheat's $8, there's 8 cents. Wheat's $12, there's 12 cents. So you can see if your loaf of bread goes up $1 a bushel, it's not because the price of wheat went up, it's because the cost of energy probably went up to deliver it, but how much can that actually be in a loaf of bread when there's a lot of loaves of bread on a truck? It's basically the middlemen taking advantage of a situation, whether it's the millers, the bakers, they're your national bakers. I'm not necessarily saying your hometown bakers, but it's your national bakers who might take advantage and raise prices. But the end result is the price of bread that you buy is not going to double. It may go up 50 cents or $1, but it's always going to be on their shelf, because we're not going to run out of bread or wheat just because Ukraine is offline right now. That's a longer term issue. And where are we on break time before
I tell you what, you named it, or you nailed it.